We'll talk a bit about masks tonight and about some of the craziness they seem to engender. They're only surgical masks or face masks used to stop the spread of germs. They impede the spread of the coronavirus, of course. The sorts of masks that will be mandatory in Melbourne from Thursday, the sort that are recommended across the United States at the moment, the sort of mask that anyone who's been to Japan or Hong Kong in recent decades would have seen in common usage. Yet, bizarrely, in this loopy year of the pandemic, the wearing or non-wearing of masks has not been just a matter of public health. It's not just a medical decision, an issue of personal choice. It's also become hyper-partisan. It's been politicised, especially in the US, where the Liberal left and the Democrats were early advocates for masks, and the president's reluctance to do so has meant that those not wearing masks have been seen as very Trumpian. There's been no masking the ideological battles at play.
It's become the latest front line in America's relentless culture war.
Are you going to allow the government to tell you you have to wear a mask?
Somehow, incredibly, in the midst of the worst pandemic in a century, Americans are fighting over whether to wear a mask or not. Like former Major League Baseball player Aubrey Huff, whose tweet this week went viral.
Hell, I would rather die from coronavirus than to live the rest of my life in fear and wearing a damn mask.
Donald Trump and Joe Biden have argued about the merits of masks. The president wore one for the first time on the weekend. One Republican governor was moved to tears when he pleaded for people to stop making masks political.
If someone is wearing a mask, they're not doing it to represent what political party they're in or what candidates they support. They might be doing it because they've got a 5-year-old child who's been going through cancer treatments. They might have vulnerable adults in their life who are currently have COVID and are fighting.
Now, sad to say, we're starting to see the same partisanship in this country, where we should be seeing discussion of what's sensible, what's practical, what the medical experts say, what should be compulsory and what should be personal choice. Well, instead, we're getting people in the media looking to play politics. Have a look at this from the ABC last night.
But it's more than just the scientific advice. It is fair to say, Viom, that not everyone in Melbourne supports the order to wear masks out in public. This is Victorian Liberal MP Tim Smith on 2GB this morning.
I do think people are going, you got to be kidding me. If I'm just going for a walk around the block, why on earth do I need to wear a mask if I'm on my own? I mean, that seems a bit daft. If I'm in my car on my own, why on earth do I need to wear a mask? I mean, it does seem slightly extreme.
Slightly extreme, Viom. A huge burden, he tweeted as well, on Victorians.
Yeah, I mean, this is just so flat out wrong. So you do not need to be wearing a mask if you're in a car by yourself, and just calling it an immense burden. We're talking about like a 5-gram piece of fabric. What we're really seeing here from Tim Smith is just this attempt to, in this very American way, just lift this debate to the level of, civic responsibility versus individual liberties.
Yeah.
And when we do these things, you end up with an unsolvable problem that hasn't been, solved in libraries full of books and philosophy. And we're not going to get the solution from Tim Smith, that's for sure.
Well, I just think this thing that Tim Smith and others are doing is incredibly indulgent. Like, who doesn't want to be a good citizen?
OK, so the Liberal MP Tim Smith is portrayed as the anti-masker, the ideologue who rails against the infallible good sense of Labor Premier Daniel Andrews and his latest rules. The ABC host just can't understand how anybody would even question the latest edict.
Now, how does it happen, Amanda? How does this culture war thing get going? I'm a bit confused by it because I guess when you look at people saying, look, I'm a libertarian and no one should tell me to wear a piece of fabric across my face, it does seem to fly in the face of what you were talking about before, Amanda, about social responsibility and respect for scientific expertise.
Good question, Ellen Fanning. How does this become a culture war? How does the wearing or not wearing of a mask become political or ideological? Well, here's a clue. Sometimes the media is mischievous. Sometimes it's shows like your own at the ABC that misrepresent people in order to create said culture wars. Here's a little more of Tim Smith. This is from the very same interview the Drum took their clip from.
So if I'm just going for a walk, if I'm walking to the office, I must wear a mask. Now, I think that that's going to cause some difficulties for people, but I think the basic premise of if you are in a supermarket or on public transport, I think most people will accept that as reasonable given the circumstances.
Reasonable given the circumstances. That's what he said. Does that sound ideological? Does that sound like a culture war? Or does that sound like a politician accepting a pretty drastic measure but simply making the point that if you're walking in a park on your own, a mask might not be necessary? Isn't it the ABC looking to create the culture war here? The ABC misrepresented what Smith said in order to try to create a partisan debate. Apparently, the ABC doesn't want any criticism of anything Daniel Andrews does, no public discussion about policy options and practicalities, and it sets up a phony partisan argument to try to silence or shame any dissenters. That's your tax dollars at work, playing tricks to divide the nation in a pandemic.